Hey guys, we're revisiting this abandoned sawmill. So I came up here about a year ago, did a video on it, and did a really thorough walkthrough, and we're going to see that here in a little bit. But I was lucky enough to come back, and this time I brought my drone with me, and we're able to get some aerial shots of this place. So this is just to kind of give you guys this idea of the scale of it, because really is a big site for how remote it is. This is in the middle of nowhere. I don't want to give an exact location just because there's a lot of equipment here and I don't want to encourage vandals to come up. But if you're curious, think Western BC. If you want a Tim Hortons, you're about a 2-hour drive away. You're in the middle of nowhere for this. So what you're looking at here, kind of give you a brief synopsis of it. This mill operated for a few decades and it went under. And it's special to me because I used to work here. I was a teenager, I was in high school, and this was my first job. I was washing chip trucks. So once it went under, they came in there and they scrapped everything but 3 buildings. So this is just an empty parking lot. And it sat like that for a couple of years. Then they come in there with this other company. This other company buys out this property and they says, hey, we're gonna restart operations here. We're gonna invest in rebuilding this sawmill. So what you're looking at is all the infrastructure that they brought in. They brought these 2 big log stackers in here. They brought all this equipment. This is, from best I can guess, is used sawmills that they probably bought at auction that they're assembling here to get this mill operational. And somewhere along the way, they lost money. They went under, I don't know if they went completely bankrupt or if they just mothballed the whole operation and they're just leaving it for another time. But they literally just, packed up their stuff, walked away. So this is what's left of it. I can tell you that the one thing that's really changed in a year since I've been here is one of those log stackers has moved. They used to be parked right next to each other, and they moved one a couple hundred feet away, took the batteries out of it. I'm not sure if that was some thief coming up here, moving it around and taking the batteries, or if that was one of the people that worked here, but nonetheless, that moved. Other than that, everything is pretty much the same as it was a year ago, which is kind of crazy because there's a lot of stuff here, and just to let it sit here and rot is, kind of mind-boggling. But when the company goes under, I mean, that's kind of what happens. So this is just some aerial shots here, just to kind of give you a size of the scope of this place. So what we're going to do now is we're going to hop onto the ground and we're going to get into it and we're going to walk through and check it out, and I'm going to go a little bit more into the history of it and what my connection is with it. So what you're seeing right here is an abandoned logging mill. And this mill has a lot of cool history to it. And it's kind of special to me because this was my first job. I was still in high school. I mean, I just got my driver's license and I got hired working here washing trucks. So we're going to kind of walk around and just show you where things were and tell you a little bit about the history of stuff. So history-wise on this mill, in 1937, the man that founded it, he started in the timber industry right out of high school. So he started logging and bounced around a couple places, and in 1955 he acquired this location. And it's a pretty decent sized plot of land here, and it was just a logging operation. So this was not just, it wasn't a sawmill at that point. It was a logging operation. So they kept all their, chainsaws and logging equipment out here. And it wasn't until 1969 that this place became an actual sawmill. So he owned the property for a while, but, logging was his thing, and then transitioned into the sawmill industry. And from there, this place mainly produced 2x4s and 2x6s. That was his bread and butter. At one point, I think there was some veneer that was being produced out of here, but that wasn't during my time working here. And then I came to work here in 2003. So I was washing the chip trucks that they would, basically all the byproducts of sawing the logs, they would send them up and they would be taken to a port, loaded onto a barge, and taken to another plant that would make like OSB plywood. And that is So my job was to wash those chip trucks, kind of a shop hand, and I would do all the oddball jobs. So that was actually across the street at the truck shop. So, and occasionally I would get pulled up here into the sawmill, and I would do odd jobs like stacking mill ends of 2x4s and putting the stickers on the ends of 2x4s and 2x6s that you have the barcodes that you scan when you go to Home Depot. So I was the guy who actually put those stickers on. So that was 2003, and I worked here for I think 2 years roughly, and in 2015 the owner, or 2012, sorry, the owner of this mill passed away, and in 2015 this mill shut down. So that was a pretty long run for a logging mill, and it's pretty cool. So what you're seeing right here, excuse me, this is what used to be the lumber yard. So this is where we'd stack all the freshly kilned lumber. It was in these big bundles, and this was just stacked to the ceiling. And what you're seeing right here is actually in 2022, there was a company that came in, bought this location, and was going to try to restart doing sawmill operations out here. And this is what you're looking at. This is all the equipment that they brought in to try to get a sawmill up and running again. And that ended up failing, and this is what is left over. And it's kind of crazy to see. There is they just picked up and left town. So all the parts are still here. I mean, they were in the process of literally building a sawmill, and I don't know if it was a funding issue or what all the reasons for it, but for some reason it did not go. It did not, never got up and running. So you have just thousands and thousands of dollars worth of stuff sitting here, maybe millions, who knows. A lot of used stuff, it looks like. I mean, they have the paintbrush right there that they were just, painting equipment, and one day they said, hey, we're done. So this place has now been abandoned twice. You have like pretty new Doosan loader right there. And literally right here on this side of this wall here toward us, this is where I worked. And I would be putting those little stickers, those barcode stickers, on the end of the 2x4s. I would come in at the night shift. They're not really running logs at night shift, but there's people doing cleanup and maintenance happening. And that's when I would come in. I'd park my pickup truck right there. I'd blast some music, and I would just put stickers on 2x4s and 2x6s. So what you're seeing here is they're building a sawmill, and that's the bandsaw right there. That is what would cut the lumber. So the lumber will come in and get loaded onto this car right here, and this car's on a giant track, and it would just slide back and forth, and it would go against that blade, and that blade would advance every few passes, and it would take off more chunks. The rest of the stuff, not exactly sure. Like I said, it's been a few years since I worked in a sawmill. But yeah, this is, there's a lot of stuff here. So they never, like I said, they never got this thing fully operational. So, and then here's, I think this is the sorter where it would sort the probably 2x4s. And they got halfway done with building it, and yeah, just packed up and left. Really kind of crazy. So the original sawmill, like I said, this was just the building where they stored the freshly kilned lumber. So the original sawmill itself was all outside of here. So there's a whole bunch of other buildings here. So on the outside again. And like you can see, they're putting in utilities here. I mean, this looks like conduit for electrical. I mean, this all just came to a grinding halt. On this side right here, you have where this is our workshop, and this building actually is where they would, what was this? This was the, I want to say they kept like loaders and stuff backed in here in storage, like log loaders and stuff. The smaller ones, not the big Laterna log stackers, but like smaller loaders and forklifts and stuff were stored sitting out here. But this new company that bought this place, this was their workshop. You can see they, this is only 2 years ago that they bought this place and started work on it. And so they brought in all the stuff. Because when they bought this site, none of this stuff was here. It was literally just this empty warehouse building. This one we're standing under here currently. And there's a big empty paved lot. And they brought in everything else you see here. So this big crane here, everything. And this is kind of a remote location. And so, yeah, this was not cheap. So right over here, this is the big processing conveyor belt that they would bring logs on. So they load them out here. And just on the other side of this door here is that big saw blade right there, that big bandsaw. And as you can see, this is the stand for the conveyor belt that just never got built. So, I don't know, maybe they got maybe, 30-50% of the way through getting this thing operational. That kind of sucked to put in all that hard work and then, get told, hey, sorry guys, we're shutting down shop. I don't know. I'm assuming most of this equipment looks used. So I'm sure that they bought this at a, auction or something, or from some other mill and brought this in here. And this looks brand new. Actually, be careful where I'm stepping because I don't want to step on a grate or something that's not welded down. Because, like I said, this is all in the process of being built. I'm going to zoom you in here. Got the rust already forming on this hydraulic cylinder. So, and what that is that's the output roller, and this is the debarker. So there's some blades that spin around inside that drum there, and that will peel off all the bark. There's the blades. And then they feed the logs through, and that's what peels off the bark before going into the mill for the milling process. Like I said, I'm just being cautious on where I'm walking. So there's your input shafts, or the input where the logs go in, and giant saw here, so you can bucket into the right lengths. And this stuff's all computer controlled. So, even when I worked here, it was computer controlled. You just have one guy that would, the machine would know where to cut the wood at. Down there, that conveyor belt, that's to take all your chips away. Say you just need to cut a butt off, so like a 1 foot section, they just cut it off. It's a carbide tip right there, and it's a hefty saw. 7 feet, 8 foot in diameter maybe. And there's still, someone just welded that on there, and I never got a chance to put some paint on it. There's a motor. Thing is massive. And yeah, they would load the logs onto this deck here, and it would roll through, and they have these little fingers that would come up that keep too many logs from rolling onto the conveyor belt at once. But yeah, this is kind of neat. Seeing a half-built sawmill, not something you get to see every day. I guess I can walk along here. Like I said, some of this walkway surface does not look the best, but just being careful where I step. It's only about a 20-foot fall, I'm sure it'll be fine. So there's your big old motor there. There's my paw for size right there. That's, take your guess. It's not a small motor. This is the track for the electrical conduit that never even got ran. So, kind of crazy. You're using Connex boxes for the probably the power transformers, I'm guessing. Yeah, in 2 years' time, they put in all this, and I'm not sure at what point they pulled out operations, but this has been sitting idle up here for, I'd say, at least a year plus. Hopefully I don't find a wasp nest in here. And there's your control setup. This is all custom. They're just putting in whatever button they think will work there. You even got the green algae on the seat. And then there's your power box right there, or I guess that's probably the relay box. Never got finished. The logging industry in general is a very hard industry to make money in. It's very manpower and equipment intensive, and it's hard on stuff. It's a very brutal industry. You know, all your equipment's just constantly being abused just because of the nature of it. If you're out in the woods logging, and then even in lumber mills, I mean, you know, it's just a hard way to make a living. It's very cyclical, so kind of like construction. When it's, you know, when it rains, it pours. You know, you have your good days, or your good years, I should say, where you make lots of money, and you go into other years where there's not the demand, or there's something that has shut down existentially, that has shut down the industry. And one thing that really hit this particular part of the world hard in the 80s and 90s was spotted owl. And what had happened is it became registered on the endangered species list. This is a very abbreviated version, but it became an endangered species registered, and it essentially brought most of the logging in the Pacific Northwest to a halt. So all of western Washington, Oregon, it just put the brakes on. And that put a ton of people out of work. And, you know, that's you know, if you're a fourth generation logger and this is all you know is being in the timber industry, you don't know anything different, you don't know any other skills or any other jobs, that's a really difficult position to find yourself in. And there's part of me that's kind of, you know, walking down memory lane, walking through what this sawmill was, and, you know, getting to work here. But this is just it's just the reality of the logging industry, is it has gone downhill. And I won't say gone downhill, but just there's no demand for it, feels like, at least out here in the Pacific Northwest region, that all the mills, you know, a lot of parts of western Washington, even into Oregon, have all been shut down. They just can't make it. So yeah, it's kind of sad in that respect. There's one hefty little wasp nest up there. Rather find that down standing here on the ground instead of being up there and disturbing it and then finding out, oh hey, you got some pissed off inhabitants that do not want you there. Tires a little low. I believe that these are Wagner's, or that's the company that builds this style of log stacker. It's called Wagner, and they're based out of Oregon. And I think this is the newer design, if I remember correctly. And this axle setup here is the older design. So You have an actual true axle where those are really tight together wheels. And then to turn it, you have the two cylinders that stick out here. Where the one over there, the pin that it articulates on is directly above the axle. So this is a true, think of this more of a three-wheeled design, and think of this as more of an articulated machine, because you do have about, oh gosh, that's probably about 6 feet between that pin there and the center of this tire here. So I believe this is an older design. But there's just a ton of equipment here that never got installed. It's just sitting here rotting away. These log stackers are cool though. I've never got to actually run one. I had to wash them and stuff and help with some of the maintenance on it, but never got to run them. The one at this mill ran in the day was a Laterno, and it was a diesel electric. So diesel power plant, run an electric generator, and then I want to say I think it was AC drive. So then you just had these giant cables that would go to these motors, and the motors would run the drive wheels. It would run the boom up and down. It had a cable system. It was a really old log stacker. It was one of the first Laternos, one of their first log stackers, and they kept up on the maintenance on it, and they just kept it running. But yeah, this thing's got disc brakes. So yeah, these are cool machines. Really heavy iron. And the reason you're seeing what seems to be two sets of pinchers there is the smaller one is for, sorting logs, so, you can pick them up, pick up 1 or 2 logs at a time. Same thing. You can essentially articulate out the back jaw and the front jaw past this tongue here, and then you can pick logs with it. So if you're wanting to pick individual logs out of a pile to separate them, then that's what that's for. I'm going to assume that this is the Ritchie Brothers special paint job, because I didn't even bother taping off the hydraulic cylinder. So I don't know if it's Ritchie Brothers that did that, but you see these auction houses that get a piece of equipment and they paint everything, and they don't always tape everything off, and so there's a whole bunch of equipment here that never got installed. I was just sitting out here, and who knows, probably gonna go to scrap with them, I guess. I can't imagine a company dumping the amount of money that they did into this place and not. They're going to pull the plug, and assuming that they would come out here and scrap all this stuff. And even if they didn't scrap it, there's probably still value of selling to a different sawmill. Yeah, 1969. Yeah, it was 69 to 2015. Which, for a company that's owned by one person, and, especially in the logging industry, that's a pretty good run. Most companies don't stick around that long, and if they do, they get bought up by bigger corporations, and they just, become a part of a corporate conglomeration. So giant drive wheels for those bandsaws in there. I don't really see a crown on these either. I know like on the Deltas that I've restored, you have to have a little bit of a crown on it. Usually it's a polyurethane rubber tire that gets wrapped around the wheel, and that allows that belt to track straight, but those don't seem to have that. So when this mill was operational, that warehouse was there, and basically everything in front of the camera here was the sawmill itself. So you have essentially just a couple warehouses and that hold all the equipment, and that's where the cutting happened, that's where the debarking happened. Way over by the tree line there, they have these big chip towers that would hold all the chips, and they'd be able to drive a truck underneath of it, and it would open up these doors at the very bottom and it would fill it with chips. So nothing went to waste here. And some of the chips, it was the stuff that they couldn't sell as chips for the OSB. That would get burned as hog fuel they had a giant furnace, and that furnace is what provided the steam to run the kiln. And you could always see this just tower of, looked like smoke, but it was steam coming out of this place. And it was just how they heated the place and how they dried everything. There's a lot of equipment out here. Kind of nostalgic for me to be back here walking around. This is the site of my first job, and it's sad to see that shut down. I think in the heyday, I think they had about 75 people working here. It was less than that when I think it went shut down in 2015. I think it was like 45 was the number I remember reading. But it was a cool place, to be around heavy equipment and all the machinery, and I love that as a younger person. And now it is just being slowly reclaimed by nature. Somebody else has tried to make it work, and that is so far failed. This is what they stack the lumber on to shove it into the kiln. So you see, you have these rollers here that are fairly seized up. You see that bushing's had way better days. There's some slop in there. But anyway, this sits on essentially train car tracks, and these are the carts. They load the pallets of lumber on here, and then they open the door to the kiln, and they shove these big carts in there, shut the door, let the kiln do its thing for however long that wood needs to be in there, and then they push from the back, so it's constantly full. At least when I worked here it was. So they would, shove another cart into the back of the last cart, and then it would shove the first cart out the front door. So it was just, it was just continuous process essentially of, pushing lumber through, and as it sat in there, it would dry out and come out the other side. These are the doors for those chip hoppers. So this is one side. These teeth would mesh up to one of these other ones here, and that would open up, and that's what allows you to drop all the chips into the chip trucks. And then you have your land of motors over here. And you get to see it all spread out like this and unassembled. It's really kind of fascinating how much goes into making one of these mills work. It's not just a simple, saw and kiln. I mean, there's a lot of pieces here. This looks like some sort of boiler. Like I said, all the original stuff from when I worked here was scrapped, and I just left that big warehouse there. So Yeah, my guess is this is the boiler. So I think you have, oh no, I'm not sure on this one. Yeah, I probably put the plum water in there, and yep, there's the tubes. So that honeycomb shape of tubes, those run all the way through it. The smoke and the heat is exposed to each one of those tubes as it's going up the chimney, and transferring that heat into those tubes converts it over to steam from just pure water, and that's what you use to dry the wood. And you know, any heat you need or any pressure you need, you got it right there on site. And I'm not quite sure why they would not just leave the sawmill. I don't know if there was value in the scrap metal, and you know, just having it fall to the torch, if that was more profitable for them, or what the reasoning was. You think it would be easier just to walk away from a sawmill, and that way if somebody else wants to try to restart it, they have all the skeletons there at least. Obviously, they'll probably have to do some work on it. But yeah, that's a little walk down memory lane. Kind of crazy to see, you know, place that your first job was at, and now it's all but gone. And somebody else comes in, tries to make it work. They have failed, and here it sits.